In December 2017, plumbers were called to a quiet area of Ontario where they expected their job to be routine, clearing a clogged drain, which usually isn't very complicated. They brought along a plumbing snake, a primary tool consisting of a long wire with a corkscrew end. If the clog wasn't serious, they shouldn't have needed more than an hour with this specialized instrument. However, the situation turned out to be anything but straightforward. After several days with non-functioning pipes, neighbors began to react with concern as they desired a quick and easy resolution to the problem. But what the plumbers discovered in the sewer was far from their expectations. Their horrifying find led to a call to the police, who turned the area into a crime scene. The plumbers stumbled upon evidence of a brutal murder, body parts cruelly discarded in the toilet. And this marked the beginning of the story of Adam Strong. Let's begin with Rory Hachette. She was born in July 1999 in Oshawa, a quiet suburb of Ontario, Canada. Rory was a bright and energetic child who adored animals and elderly people. She was actively involved in extracurricular activities, including being an Army cadet, and by the age of 13, she had won the Cadet of the Year award twice. However, when she entered high school a year later, her life began to decline. At 14, as a freshman, she was offered crystal meth. She accepted it, marking the first step in a long battle with addiction that began during her teenage years. Rory came from a troubled background. Her grandfather, Bernie Gwindon, known as Bernie the Frog, was the founder of the Satan's Motorcycle Club, which was once the second largest biker gang in the world. As a legislator with serious convictions for drugs and violence, he served 22 years in prison and fathered between 11 and 16 children. One of them was Rory's uncle, Harley Davidson Gwindon, who owned a clothing store in Oshawa. Rory and Harley were close. Harley, a biker from the Hells Angels, had a criminal history, including drug offenses, and sported a tattoo on his back that indicated his prison fight record: 41 wins and no losses. Nevertheless, he showed particular affection for his niece. In 2016, when Rory turned 17, she lived with Harley and his family while he was under house arrest for drug-related crimes. Rory's mother, Shannon Dion, reached out to Child Protective Services, believing it was the only way to get help for her daughter in her struggle with addiction. Although these services didn't yield results, Rory managed to turn her life around on her own. The last 6 months of her life were filled with positive changes. Rory started dating a boy named Tony, and she even got her own apartment. Recently, Harley had given her and her mother $1,000 to help cover living expenses. Rory found a job and returned to her studies, and things started to improve. However, in August 2017, Rory's aunt, Michelle Gwindon, took her to a pharmacy to buy a pregnancy test. The result was positive. Rory was pregnant and eagerly awaiting motherhood. But at the end of that same month, events took a horrifying turn. On August 10th, an inexplicable fire occurred at Rory's mother's home, injuring Shannon and taking the life of her dog. This became a catalyst for Rory's downfall. She frequently visited a youth center called The Shelter, and staff noticed that she had recently relapsed on drugs, although they had noted an improvement in her situation back in August. A few days before the end of August, Harley met with Rory and observed that something was off with her. She refused to discuss her feelings and seemed distressed, enigmatic. He described her hugs as heart-wrenching, the largest she had ever given, feeling as though it was a farewell. On August 29th, 2017, a friend of Rory and the friend's mother took her to the hospital. Although we do not know the exact reason that prompted this, she was described as having experienced a severe mental episode. Surveillance cameras captured Rory sitting alone in the waiting room while her friend and her friend's mother were leaving the hospital. After 15 minutes, Rory decided to leave the medical facility without waiting for a doctor's examination. The video recorded the last moments of her time at the hospital. This was the last time Rory Hachette was seen alive. As the days passed without her, her friends, along with a counselor, began to express concern. Her family, also worried, tried to figure out what had happened. Some thought she might have run away from town, returning to her old habits. But her loved ones were sure she wouldn't do that, given her pregnancy and stable relationships. This only heightened their anxiety. On September 11th, 2017, the situation took a horrifying turn. On a cozy evening in Oshawa, a grandfather and his 11-year-old grandson went fishing. Standing on the pier over the water, they noticed something unusual, initially mistaking it for trash. After half an hour of effort, they managed to pull the find from the water with a net. One of the fishermen recalled that at first, he thought it could be a chicken, but soon realizing it was something much worse, the grandfather made a horrific suggestion. "I think it's a body." The object pulled from the lake turned out to be a female torso. When police arrived at the scene, they found signs of trauma and determined that the torso had been deliberately severed from the rest of the body. Authorities took it away for further identification. The police contacted other agencies in an attempt to learn about possible unsolved missing persons cases. However, given the size of Ontario, it couldn't be ruled out that the body had been transported to Oshawa from somewhere else. The absence of a pelvis from the torso complicated the identification process, and the condition of the found torso made it difficult to determine whether the victim was pregnant. For over 2 months, until November 10th, DNA comparisons were made between the torso and samples provided by Rory's family, ultimately revealing a match. It turned out that the severed torso belonged to Rory Hashett, and her disappearance case was now a homicide investigation. But how did the torso end up in the lake? Who was responsible? And, most horrifyingly, where was the rest of her body? No traces remained. The lake had washed away all evidence that could point to the perpetrator, and Rory's final actions remained a mystery. The police did not know how long she had been in the lake or how much time she had spent alive after leaving the hospital. What circumstances led to her disappearance? At that moment, the police had no answers to these questions, and the family waited helplessly for news. The wait stretched until December 28, 2017, when police received a report of a horrifying discovery made by plumbers in Oshawa. The plumbers had been called to clear a clogged pipe in an upstairs couple's apartment. The blockage had persisted for several days, and a neighbor living in the basement, Adam Strong, had been unable to resolve the issue, although he had tried to help by asking the upstairs neighbor for a plumbing snake to clear it. He claimed that the blockage was caused by a blown-up condom. The upstairs neighbors decided to call the plumbers themselves. The actual cause of the blockage was in the apartment on the first floor, which Strong had rented for over 10 years. Therefore, the plumbers knocked on his door. An unpleasant odor filled the basement. Strong appeared nervous, noting that the condition of the pipes was terrible. During their work, the plumbers discovered human flesh in the pipes. They were shocked to realize what they were dealing with and to understand that they had spent so much time near this man. When the police knocked on Strong's door, he opened it and almost immediately said, "The game is over. It's a body." Adam Strong was arrested without delay. In the patrol car, he didn't lose his composure and, without any signs of remorse, stated, "If you need more, it's in my freezer, and it's pretty much without meat." These words sent a chill through the officers, and without hesitation, they opened the freezer. Inside, they found various dismembered parts of a human body, including a head adorned with a tattoo that read "Alive," the same as Rory's. An autopsy confirmed that these were the body parts of Rory Hashett, which showed numerous facial injuries and 2 fractures. The exact cause of death could not be determined. Traces of drugs were found in her system, but their quantity could not be quantified. There was a possibility that Rory had been strangled or had died from blunt force trauma. Regardless, her death resulted from a horrific attack. The police were unable to achieve significant results during their interrogations of Strong, despite his initial talkativeness and near bragging about his finds on his property. Therefore, detectives proceeded to his apartment in search of additional evidence. Inside, there was chaos and filth. Among the findings were restraints, adult toys, and weapons, including a hammer that had Rory's DNA on it. The police also stumbled upon Rory's sneakers, packaged in a plastic bag, with probable bloodstains. Bloodstains were also found on the walls and baseboards leading to Strong's bedroom. An examination of Strong's online activity revealed his obsession with extreme violence and death, which had manifested in a horrifying way. During the investigation, a detonator was found in a suspicious package, which drew the attention of the Durham County Police. But most importantly, in a knife block, they discovered a specialized knife intended for processing animals. This knife had evidently been used to dismember Rory. The police tested the knife for DNA, and this discovery shocked the detectives. It contained the DNA of another victim, 19-year-old Candace Fitzpatrick. Little is known about her, only that she resembled Rory. Like Rory, Candace had struggled with drug issues, but she had a loving family that had been searching for her for nearly 10 years since her disappearance in March 2008. At the time, she was just 18 years old. Candace's family was convinced that their daughter had fallen victim to an experienced criminal, as she was a strong girl and could not have been an easy target. Now the investigation had a hint of what might have happened to Candace, and it certainly did not bode well. Upon discovering Candace's DNA on the knife, the police returned to Strong. During the interrogation, he initially focused on talking about Rory. His attitude toward Rory's death was callous and cruel. He claimed that the dismemberment of her body began after her death, and at that time, he felt safe from any accusations. However, the more he spoke, the more information detectives obtained about his crimes, providing the court with more grounds to charge him with offenses against Rory. Strong did not confess to the murder of either Rory or Candace, but admitted that he knew Rory, that he had dinner with her, and that she had come to his apartment on more than one occasion. He confessed that he dismembered her body after her death and expressed surprise that her torso was found in the lake. He did not think it could float to the surface. He also described the months it took him to dispose of parts of her body, attributing it to procrastination. Strong blamed himself for not getting rid of the knife with Candace's DNA, believing that if he had, he might not have been caught. He also admitted that he had known Candace initially. This time, the physical evidence was sufficient to charge Adam Strong with the murders of both women in November 2018, a year after Rory's torso was identified. Without any confessions, the prosecutors were forced to focus on Strong as the main suspect. Adam Strong, born in 1972, was 45 years old at the time of his arrest. He worked at a gas station and occasionally served as a guard on film sets. Little is known about his early life, but he claimed to have had a difficult childhood, blaming it for his behavior. "These are my actions, but I'm not sure I would have done them if I had been raised differently." He mentioned his tough childhood and his problems in relationships with women. At trial, prosecutors called two women who had once had relationships with Strong at least 20 years ago when he was just over 20. Both women's testimonies indicated that he had an interest in bondage and choking, which was consensual for one and a source of fear for the other regarding her safety. Such facts painted a picture of a person with aggressive and violent tendencies. The defense attorneys tried to suggest that the women may have died from overdoses, and Strong, in a panic, disposed of their bodies to avoid prosecution. However, the injuries found on Rory's body contradicted this version. Strong constantly tried to delay the hearing process. Due to the pandemic, the hearings were conducted via video link, but even in these circumstances, he sometimes refused to appear. "I was on my feet all night," he claimed, declining to meet with his attorney, asserting that he was tired and wanted to sleep. His cynical behavior did not evoke sympathy from the judges, and on March 16, 2021, after numerous delays, he was found guilty of first-degree murder of Rory Hachette and involuntary manslaughter of Candace Fitzpatrick. This was particularly striking, given that there was no body of Candace and no confessions to the murders. But his admission regarding the dismemberment was entirely sufficient. The murder charge carried an automatic life sentence. In July 2021, resigned to the inevitability of punishment, Strong told a prison guard about the location of Candace's remains. The police accompanied him to a spot he indicated, which turned out to be an intersection in Oshawa, where he claimed he buried her body. "We had problems like this, but bad people aren't sent from hell. You know what I mean?" he said, while expressing gratitude to the detectives for their work. "I can't understand his attitude. He feels no guilt for his actions. It seems he judged himself and found himself innocent," remarked one person close to the case. The sentence handed down could be particularly dangerous for Strong. Rory's family had connections to biker gangs, including Bernie Guindon, the founder of the Satan's Choice Club, which could lead to attempts at revenge from its members. One inmate noted, "You can't kill the granddaughter of someone connected to the Hells Angels and get away with it." However, The details regarding how Strong met these women and the reasons for their murders remain unclear. The prosecution suggested that these crimes exhibited signs of randomness and that Strong might have encountered Candace and Rory on the streets and abducted them. But he continues to hide the truth. The most alarming aspect remains the decade-long gap between his first and second murders and the question of what he might have done during that time. This story compels us to reflect on the dark corners of human nature and the price that innocent victims pay. It illustrates how the past can intertwine with the present, creating horrific consequences. The murders of Rory and Candace remind us of the vulnerability of those living on the fringes of society, as well as how irresponsibility and indifference can lead to tragedy. Each instance of violence is not just a statistic. It represents lost lives, shattered families, and the pain that lingers for those who have endured this horrific reality. Therefore, by asking ourselves why this happened and how we can prevent similar occurrences in the future, we learn to appreciate the value of every human life. I invite you to subscribe to my channel, where you will find even more detective stories that I reveal personally. Feel free to share your thoughts about this story in the comments. I'm interested in your opinion.